Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be talking about 6 tricks that interior designers use. You know, I talk a lot about kind of like tips about what you can use in design, like, you know, lighting. I talk a lot about lighting. People make fun of me because I think I mention it. I think I mentioned it in like 1 or 2 videos, maybe 50, something like that. But in this video, rather than just kind of providing some general advice, I thought I would get really specific on some interesting tricks that I see designers use over and over and over again that honestly make a space just to look like it's been done by an interior designer as opposed to mere mortals. Mere mortal. So let's talk about it in this video. Okay, but one of the main tricks that designers actually use is sourcing from really sort of unique and interesting retailers. Places like Huey Lighting, you see that cute little lamp back there? That's from Huey Lighting, they're adorable. What you might not realize though is that a lot of those retailers are run on Shopify, which is the sponsor of today's video. I've been a Shopify customer for over a decade myself. I've used their point of sale system, the online stuff, used them for several businesses, and I love Shopify. They have all the tools that you need to get started to build your business online. Shopify offers beautiful templates that are really simple to use, the ability to sell online or in person with all of the social features that you need to get in front of your customers exactly where they are. And they have everything that you need to get started really, really quickly with those templates. And also as you start to grow, they have all the tools that you need to actually be able to scale your business. So it kind of grows with you, which is great because let's be optimistic. So get started with your free trial today by going to shopify.com/NickLewis. Now let's get back to the video so we can talk about some of those other super amazing interior design tricks. Okay, first trick that I see interior designers do this all the time, and that is hanging their curtains higher and also hanging curtains in places that you wouldn't necessarily always expect, right? So let's talk about curtains because I would say my most viewed TikTok, rest in peace TikTok, is it? I mean, at the time of recording, it could be banned. It could be here to stay. We have no idea. Who cares? But listen, my most biggest TikTok ever that was really controversial was I told people to hang their curtains higher. I don't know, the whole TikTok lost their damn minds, which was fun for me because I just enjoy people losing their minds over things that you say on the internet because it doesn't really matter. Anyway, the tip is hang your curtains higher than you probably think, right? So oftentimes what people do is they put the little puppet show curtains, right? Where they have some like a picture window and they just hang their curtains and they create little stubby curtains that barely cover the glass. And they should be going to the floor and they should probably be going higher than you probably expect. We want to go above the window. Oftentimes people go just above the window and we actually want to oftentimes go 6 inches higher depending on ceiling height to go right kind of up against the ceiling. It's going to make the space feel bigger and it's going to feel more grand and it's going to make it just feel taller. It's going to make it feel like you have taller ceilings than you actually have. Taller ceilings, generally speaking, always make a place look more expensive. If you can get 9-foot, 10-foot ceilings, beautiful, amazing. If you're in a basement, probably not. But if you're making them feel stubby, if you're using stubby little curtains, they always feel shrunken down and it never feels as luxurious as and interesting as they are if you hang them a little bit higher. Oftentimes, again, if you're talking designers, what they will oftentimes do is they will also put their curtains either just kissing the floor or they might puddle maybe the curtains a little bit on the floor there. It's a bit more of a luxurious sort of opulent, Palace of Versailles sort of look for me, but a lot of people like to do it. It's very traditional, really grand, but it's an option if you want to choose to puddle. But for most people, they're probably looking at just kissing the floor. If they're too short and if they're too stubby, they will always look cheap. They won't, even if you're just going for ones on Amazon or whatever, they're just, get them hemmed so that they're just the perfect length of what you need. Oftentimes, depending on also where you're buying them, you can often adjust the hooks in the curtain rod to be able to get that look. So it's just the perfect length that you need for your space. So get the right length. And of course, everybody says, but what if I have a radiator underneath, blah, blah, blah. Well, tip number 1 is don't light your place on fire, okay? I can't do everything for you. If you light your place on fire because of your curtains, because you saw some person on YouTube, I can't help you, okay? So yes, you want to take safety into account, but if you're not able to, something like Roman shades are really gorgeous. A different type of window treatment, window covering might make a lot more sense than necessarily puddling curtains near a heat source, okay? Like if it's next to a fireplace, I can't do everything for you, okay? You can lead a horse to water, can't make them drink. I can't make you understand fire safety. So yes, obviously adapt this tip for your own space, please. That's where everyone lost their damn minds on TikTok because I thought I was telling everybody to light their place on fire. No, obviously safety matters. Designers always do beautiful big window treatments that are really luxurious, going right to the ceiling, right to the floor, looks gorgeous every every time. Another cool tip, which I see a lot of designers do, is also get creative with where they put them. So you might just not have them sort of in your window in your living room, but consider something like a bathroom, right? Some people will take, have an inside plastic liner for inside the shower for, obviously water and whatever, but they might have actual beautiful linen curtains, for example, on the exterior to sort of make it look a little bit more luxurious in the bathroom, which I think is a really beautiful look. Obviously linen with water source is something you gotta be really careful of, but again, that's why you use common sense. Something like a plastic liner or something will do a better job at sort of making it so that they don't get water. Obviously don't put them inside the bathtub or they're gonna get wet every day. That's disgusting. But using that tip, I think makes a bathroom look a lot more interesting because window treatments in linen or cotton or something is gonna be more beautiful than the cheap plastic liner that you got from IKEA. So give that a go. I see a lot of these sort of interesting looks that designers use, and I think that's always beautiful. Okay, next up on my list, designers use is they go big on lighting. And I mean go big on lighting in many different ways. So first, let's get the one that you hear me talk about a lot, because again, I'm a broken record when it comes to the lighting thing, which is layered lighting around a space, right? So they have table lamps, they have sconces, they have ceiling lights, they have little table lamps, they have cute floor lamps, they have candles, again, there's lots of lighting comes in all sorts of forms. They're maximizing the natural light that they get into the space when they can. Designers understand lighting and they usually go big on lighting more than your average person does, right? Under cabinet lighting, toe kick lighting for when you walk in, perhaps it's on a sensor when you walk in your walk-in closet or you walk into your kitchen at night or something, or your bathroom. Those are really great things to have sort of sensors on your toe kick lighting so that it lights up your space, emits kind of a nice, gorgeous little soft glow in your space. It's gonna be a lot more beautiful than just having to go in and flick on some daylight bulb that's gonna be, white and unflattering and makes everything look awful. So definitely designers understand that more lighting, strategically placed lighting, is always a good idea. Lighting temperature, you've heard it here before, but they tend to go a little bit warmer because it just is more flattering. So rather than sort of the daylight bulbs that you see sort of used in a garage or something, they understand that more flattering light tends to be a little bit warmer. Doesn't have to be 2700 Kelvin, can be something a little bit higher, 3000, whatever, but they don't use the garage lighting or the hospital lighting, or as I like to think of it, the psychiatric ward lighting that a lot of you are putting in your living room, okay? So go for a little bit warmer, it tends to be more flattering. Also, they understand that if it is filtered, so if you're able to put a beautiful paper shade or something on it, by filtering the light, filtered light is also a lot more flattering on people than a direct light source. So, spotlights fly into people's eyes, or down lighting tends to make people look awful, tends to not be flattering on anybody. Different lighting sources, warmer and diffuse lighting is beautiful, gorgeous lighting, and it's gonna make everything in the rest of the space look beautiful as well. So we're mixing lighting sources around the space, which is always, always, always a good idea. But in addition to that, they're also really going larger, I think, on scale than a lot of regular folks, civilians, if you will. And that's true, right? It's like you see that where oftentimes, you'll go into a designer's home or an interior design project and lighting around, say, the dining table is oftentimes seen as a bit oversized compared to what most people will do. Rarely do you see a little tiny dinky light sitting over top of a dining table, probably something a little larger in scale over a dining table, always going to make a space feel more luxurious, always going to create a real talking point, add interest into a space. It's also functional because it's going to mean that people can actually see what they're eating when they're dining there, which is always beautiful. Designers tend to go really big on the lighting in areas like the dining room, and I just love that. Also living room, right? You might not have maybe a light source, you might not think you want a light source necessarily in the living room, but oftentimes positioned over top of the coffee table, you might see a gorgeous chandelier or pendant or something hanging over top of a coffee table. Anytime like a coffee or a dining table where it's not accessible for someone to be able to hit their head, that is a great opportunity to put something like a light source, something like a pendant or a chandelier or something is a great idea. Another one I see a lot of, which again, you don't have to do this, but it is an interesting trick that I see designers do, which is something over top of like a bathtub or something. This one, you might hit your head, so you want to be a little bit more careful, but definitely if you're walking into a high-end project or a luxurious sort of bathroom, it's not uncommon to actually see a lighting source, some sort of pendant or chandelier over top of a bathtub. It's an interesting look. I think it can be really stunning. Sometimes it can feel a little bit opulent and overkill. Really depends on kind of the design style that you're going for in your space, obviously, but it's something that a lot of people don't consider doing, that designers always at least consider, or something that I see them do a lot in their projects. And of course, last word on lighting, because you know me, I could talk about lighting all day, is I see a lot of accent lighting that a lot of people don't do. So if you have a piece of art, for example, you can like ignore my tip, because of course I didn't do this, but if you have like a beautiful piece of art that you have in your home, you might want to consider putting an accent light over top. That is always something really gorgeous because it really makes that art pop, gives it such, makes it a real focal point in the room, and it just sort of really highlights the gorgeous art that you have, right? So So positioning something like lighting over top of a piece of art is gorgeous, or an area of interest that you want to highlight in the home. That's always a really good idea. Designers tend to do that. Most people don't even think about it. Okay, next up is going to be this finishing carpentry. So we're gonna talk about tall baseboards, lots and lots of moldings. What else? Big chunky casings, solid core doors, right? These sorts of things make a project feel a lot more complete. It makes the space feel more complete. It makes it feel a lot more luxurious. So I think that oftentimes, you know, if you get a builder grade home, especially if you're renovating, you might not think you necessarily need to do this. Maybe you have a house from the 90s or something like that, the early 2000s, and you see a lot of the really like short little wimpy baseboards. Those are fine. Obviously they're doing the job, but a lot of designers will go a little bit taller on the baseboard, especially, this is also very design style specific, right? Some people choose to have no baseboard. Say you're building like you're doing a Japandi space or something, or a really minimalistic space with concrete floors. You might not choose to do any at all, of course, but that's very challenging because now you're trying to create a seamless experience between the wall and the floor, which is not always easy to do. The craftsmanship required there is tricky. So if you want to do that, not for the faint of heart. But if you are going to be covering up with something like a baseboard, which of course covers all those edges and make things a lot easier for your flooring guy, then I would explore something of a taller baseboard. It just feels more luxurious to have something a little bit taller rather than those sort of little wimpy sort of 3-inch ones that you might see usually in sort of builder grade homes. That little bit of a tall baseboard could be something like 5 inches, something like that. It just adds that little bit, makes it look a lot more luxurious, a lot more modern, just a lot more interesting, right? It's those little details that make a really big impact. Casings, similar story, right? You might see those kind of wavy sort of builder grade, you know, those kind of little French curve sort of thing, those little casings that you see typically around door frames. Common, used all the time, perfectly fine, they're functional, whatever. But a designer usually, if they're gonna go and scope out for a renovation project or a new build, probably gonna, you know, choose a more interesting casings, probably gonna be a little bit chunkier, gonna have a little bit more presence on the wall. And I think that's a really gorgeous thing as well. And of course, other moldings. So panel moldings, could be a crown molding, depends on the space. Honestly, sometimes it feels a little bit old fashioned, depending on sort of, again, your design style. All these tips, of course, are design style specific because you can do as you want. Of course, it's your home, not mine. But people tend to have a little bit more fun with their finishing carpentry when a designer is involved. They usually just scope out a lot more to do with, you know, creating more interesting walls with moldings or whatever, and just those little details and those edges around the flooring or around the casing or whatever make a massive impact. And also, speaking of doors, things like a solid core door versus something of a hollow core door or whatever is going to make an interesting, or it's going to make a space feel a lot more beautiful and luxurious. Also playing with different materials, of course. If you're going to go for a solid core door, you know, yes, you could go with something that's fairly basic and you can paint it out, whatever, but you could also go for a different wood species or what have you. And now, of course, it's a lot more expensive, but it can be really gorgeous and beautiful. Designers love to play with sort of interesting doors in their spaces and will usually, if they have the budget, will almost always recommend something of a solid core. What a solid core door means is just that it's kind of what it sounds really. A door, oftentimes, you might not realize, is hollow. So they might have kind of the outside, and then inside there's nothing there. You can usually tell by just knocking on it. You knock on a hollow core door and it's got kind of a ping to it because, you know, go ahead and check out your door right now. If it has a bit of a ping, a ring to it, it's probably hollow. A solid core, you can tell. You're gonna sit and knock on that door and you can tell that it's solid wood, right? Maybe not solid hardwood. It could have like MDF or whatever, but it's still going to feel solid. Those are usually a lot more expensive. Of course, everything nice oftentimes is, but it is going to really make a big difference. It's gonna have a lot more weight to it. It's gonna have a lot more feel. Like, it's just gonna feel better. And it also is gonna provide like a lot more soundproofing in the home. So designers, you will usually highlight that as one of the things that people forget about when they're renovating a home or building new is sound, right? We forget about that because you just sort of, when you're looking at all these renderings and these drawings and things, you're just thinking of the visual and you're forgetting that you're actually gonna live there. So different rooms, depending on the house that you have and sort of your needs, soundproofing might be a big thing. If you've got some kids, it might be really great to be able to close the door and just kind of block people out. The sound's gonna muffle, it's gonna sound a lot better. You're gonna get it's gonna be a lot quieter in the rest of the home when you start shutting doors in your space. If also, of course, budget is a concern, one thing is to maybe think about is you don't necessarily have to do solid core doors when you start seeing the like price of a 5-bedroom home when you're doing all solid core. It's gonna get pretty pricey. You might wanna just strategically choose your doors budget permitting. So if you're thinking about doing that, maybe just choose to put it on bedroom or living room or something like that might be better because that's maybe where you more likely need it. Okay, next up on my list is heavy weighted furniture. So this is We're talking visual weight, but really what we're talking about is quality furniture and craftsmanship that goes into sort of heavy furniture. So this is things like your case goods, this is your sofa, this is your chairs, this is coffee table, dining table. Well, you know what furniture is. All that sort of stuff. Choosing something that's a little bit heavier, and I'm talking like physically heavier, is going to make a visual difference in your space. It's also just going to it's gonna look better, but it's also gonna feel better when you move things around, right? There is a certain quality difference when dealing with something that is a veneer, something that is an effect, something that kind of is giving you the idea that it's maybe wood, but it's actually made of particle board. It is going to look very different than if you're choosing solid furniture pieces. Now, that doesn't mean before you click away and go, I can afford that, blah, 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 which I hear you, I get it. Solid wood furniture is crazy expensive, right? Of course, there's different types and blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, yeah, I hear you. You don't necessarily have to do this for everything, right? Like if you're gonna put in a PAX wardrobe, which of course is an IKEA's closet system, fantastic. Like you can do that and I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. You know what I mean? That's a great place to sort of save money. You don't necessarily have to go for, get a complete custom, closet system necessarily put in your home if you can't afford it, budget permitting, all that makes sense. But I do think that if you're choosing something like a coffee table, rather than maybe choosing something like a lac, which is IKEA's very, very simple, basic, like $10 coffee table, which it does the job. I'm not saying it doesn't, but this is a video on what interior designers will do to make it look, little tricks that they use, is not using light furniture like that and choosing furniture that's a little bit heavier and has a little bit more presence. Something that's just it feels like it's made of sort of solid wood and really kind of heavy sort of materials. But how do you see weight? You can tell, right? You can just honestly tell. And I feel that when I go into, I'm not picking on IKEA. I love IKEA. I just did an IKEA video. I love IKEA. But sometimes, when you feel like you're walking around IKEA and you're like you see their little rooms and stuff and you're like, everything looks nice, but something sometimes feels off and it doesn't, you're like, everything's great. Like I can't really necessarily, pinpoint all the areas where this is flawed, but you sort of look around and you're like, but at the end of the day, when you put it all together, it kind of feels a little bit cheap. This is kind of the stuff that I'm talking about, where you go in there and it's like, okay, when it's all IKEA, when it's all really light and you can pick up all your furniture with 2 fingers, sometimes it just feels like the space is not very designer and put together. Now, again, it can be beautiful and it can be fine. And if you're on a budget, I'm not shading it. I'm just saying, if you're thinking of ways that I think you can make your space feel a little bit more designer, you might want to consider mixing in some of those heavier pieces. And you can thrift some of this stuff. You can go vintage shopping and find some of this stuff. Some of the vintage stuff, of course, is crazy expensive, but there are places where you can actually buy quality used furniture that is going to actually have that heavier weight, even if it's got some dings and scrapes. If it is quality furniture, it's just gonna have that patina over time and just look really beautiful, but it's gonna help give some weight to the space. Sometimes this isn't about budget, and sometimes this really is just about prioritization rather than necessarily just straight up. Sometimes it is budget, let's be honest, but sometimes it's not. Like you can go to West Elm right now and you can buy a media console or whatever for $3,000 and it's totally fine, I get you. But you can also go and go to like a mid-century modern furniture store or a thrift store or someplace that's not even a Goodwill, but actually a place that sort of restores mid-century furniture. And for $3,000, you can also find something there that's like going to probably be better quality. Probably it's going to be actual like real heavy weight that has like a lot of sort of visual interest as well. It's going to be a lot more interesting and you can get it for the same price. So sometimes this isn't just always about budget, and sometimes it really just is about sourcing different things from different places. But at first, if you're really concerned about that, you might want to consider just mixing some pieces in that are a little bit heavier, that have a little bit more presence, because it is going to make a huge difference. Okay, and then next up on my list is going to be the little details, those little small things. And I'm talking about things like floor vents. I'm talking about electrical outlets. I'm talking about like putting things on dimmers and door switches and things like that. Those little details do make a big difference and they do matter. So yes, if you go to Home Depot, you can buy sort of the plastic white electrical door socket thingy or whatever, and you can buy it for like 80 cents or something, right? You can change some of those things out, those plastic plates. They're super cheap. They're everywhere. They make a bazillion of them. They're really cheap and they will obviously do the job. Most times though, a designer often will scope out something a little bit nicer for a higher end project. And the reason for that is because they know that those are those little switches, those little tiny things you will absolutely see in the home. You will use them every day. You're going to use your light switches all the time. You are going to walk into a room, flick the switch, you're going to use it. You're going to use the temperature dial. You're going to use things on dimmers, right? You're going to use these items, all door handles, right? Faucets. These things tend to get used every single day, all the time. And it does make a difference when using these items to have something that's a little bit more special, a little bit more beautiful, rather than just sort of the plain simple plastic ones that you can get for Home Depot or whatever sort of small kind of builder basic thing that you might normally see in a home, right? So take something like light switches, something like Buster and Punch, which sells in, they sell black, they sell like, antique brass, they sell brass ones that have these gorgeous sort of knurled handles and stuff on them. Using them is beautiful. They've got these like toggle switches that feel very old school and very, very cool. Very, very interesting, beautiful stuff. Something like that is just going to look and feel a lot more interesting than just the plain plastic one that you can find at Home Depot. Now, it might seem like a small thing and you might think how much more expensive it is to have something like that versus using just the plain basic one. But if you do consider the amount of times that you're using these items, then it is worth considering. If you don't want to do it, of course, you don't have to do any of these tips, but if it is worth considering upgrading some of those pieces, because designers do that all the time, because they know that although you might not think about it because it's just a small, stupid little thing when you're doing your renovation, when you're actually functionally using the home all the time, it matters all the time. When you go to actually look at the space and it's complete, it's those little floor vents that you're gonna notice that are just gonna be different than those plain sort of white metal ones that everybody sort of has, right? Upgrading those floor vents, upgrading all those little small little details that you might not always think about make a massive difference to the home at the end of the project. Okay, next up on my list is going to be large scale art. This is something that I see a lot of, is that designers tend to purchase large pieces. Could be a tapestry, could be whatever art means to you, but we're going to talk about kind of like art usually on the wall. Those things tend to be a little bit more expensive to do, but they make a massive difference when they're in the space, because really what we're talking about here is sort of, it feels that it's sort of in line with sort of the scale of the rest of the home. And so often people will choose small pieces of art and then cluster them together in a gallery wall. And I don't necessarily have a hate on for gallery walls. I think they can be perfectly fine. But really often what's happening with a gallery wall, I think for people, is they're taking those little small, cheaper sort of pieces and they're just like, I need to fill up this whole wall. I don't know what to do. So I'm just gonna like cluster it all in a ball and hope for the best. Which again, I don't hate on gallery walls. I think that can be perfectly fine. If you have one and you love it, great. But I do think that there is a space for really large scale art, because if you're putting it above a sofa, if you're putting it, next to a dining table or something in a dining room, it can really make a huge impact on a space. It just has that presence and it just gives you that scale that you're gonna need compared to the rest of like the wall or whatever that it's on. It's a very, very common trick that designers do to sort of just give the wall a lot more visual interest, to give the whole space a lot more personality, but something that is in line with the rest of the space. So it doesn't feel like it's too little dinky, like it's a little postage stamp sort of sitting in the center of the living room wall or something like that, right? Because so often these walls, I think that big bold, like big empty wall scares people. They don't know what to do with it. So they either gallery wall or they panic and just paint it white and just don't do anything. Sometimes I think really the answer is to put a larger piece of art there, but either they don't know where to source it, they can't afford it, or they don't like really just even think about it because they don't think that, they don't want to buy this huge piece of art because they don't even know where to go, because they don't consider themselves art people. So they just kind of get the gallery wall thing and they just get family members and stuff for photos or loved ones, or I don't know what people do. But anyway, they throw them on their wall and that's fine. But I do think that there is some room for playing with large scale art. People don't do it enough, and designers always do this in their projects, and it makes a huge difference to the space. Okay, so that's it for me for today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I'm gonna link here to my video on how to make your place look more expensive. That's gonna be less sort of specific sort of tricks that people do and a little bit more just sort of general tips that you might find super helpful. So go check out that video and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye.